Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I am Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, we spent most of our time here at Washington Gun Law geeking out about what's happening here in Washington State because we got to take care of the hometown crowd. And then, of course, we have to cover all of the national issues involving the ATF and the Biden administration because, well, that affects every lawful and responsible gun owner. But when you're talking about other states on Washington Gun Law, there's really only one of two ways we're going to end up talking about you. Either A, you have done something horrible, something terrible, something sinister, something nefarious. And we have plenty of states that we oftentimes do videos. My home state, Washington, being one of them. Of course, there's New York, there's New Jersey, there's Oregon, there's Illinois, and of course, there's the king of crazies, that being California. But then there's also another way that we'll end up doing videos about you, and that's when your state does something really awesome, whether it's your sheriff's department, your state patrol, your state legislator, and sometimes even your governor gets involved on it. And we've seen some really cool things coming out of Arkansas, Oklahoma, Washington State, Montana. And you know what? Utah, you're going to join the awesome list today because you guys have done something really awesome. I want everyone around the country to know how awesome you guys are. So today, let's spend a few minutes and talk about when your governor and state legislature tell the ATF to get lost. Okay, well, welcome to the channel, Utah. We are Washington Gun Law, the home of the lawful and responsible gun owner nationwide. This is a channel where we do not tell you how to think, but we do want to give you all the stuff to think about. Welcome to the club because you now are on the cool list. Why do I say that? Well, because earlier this week, Governor Spencer Cox of the great state of Utah signed into legislation House Bill 219. House Bill 219 was sponsored by Carrie Ann Lisenby, and if I mispronounced that name, Representative, I apologize. She was the sponsor of the bill. The Senate sponsor turned out to be Evan Victors. What does this amazing little piece of legislation do? Well, like what we talked about on this video and this video here, it basically says, hey, you know what? Federal government, if you are going to start infringing upon Utah residents' Second Amendment rights, our state resources, our state law enforcement is going to have zero cooperation with you. We are not going to assist in any way, shape, or form in violating our citizens' constitutional rights. It seems like a kind of a duh thing, but you'd be surprised how many states, Washington State for being one, that will gladly violate a citizen's constitutional rights. And so it is really nice when you see both a state legislature and the governor committed to the same principle, which is just, preserving our otherwise inalienable rights. Well, how does this bill, now law, work? Well, the general description by its author was, this bill declares that the state will not enforce certain federal firearms regulations. Okay, and I like where this is going. Now, the legislative findings, and oftentimes for those of you who have been geeking out with us now for a few months, I talk about what's happening in Washington State and the absolute disingenuous, flat-out lying that goes on in legislative findings, okay? Now, here's an example of some legislative findings that are based in, well, stuff that we were taught in high school civics. Let me read them to you. To protect and preserve the individual right to keep and bear arms as guaranteed by the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution and the Utah Constitution, Article 1, Section 6, the legislature makes the following findings. 1. The 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution guarantees to the state and the state's peoples all powers not granted to the federal government elsewhere in the United States Constitution and reserves to the state and people of Utah certain powers as those powers were understood at the time that Utah was admitted to statehood. By the way, all of that happens to be an exact, accurate statement of the law. The findings goes on to state, 2, the guarantee of powers to the state and the state's people under the 10th Amendment is a matter of contract between the state and people of Utah and the United States at the time of statehood. 3, the 9th Amendment to the United States Constitution guarantees to the people rights not granted in the United States Constitution and reserves to the people of Utah certain rights as those rights were understood at the time that Utah was admitted to statehood. 4. The guarantee of rights to the people under the 9th Amendment is a matter of contract between the state and the people of Utah and the United States as of the time of statehood. And then the findings further state, the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution reserves to the people the right to keep and bear arms as that right was understood at the time Utah was admitted to statehood, and the guarantee of the right is a matter of contract between the state and people of Utah and the United States as of the time of statehood. And finally, the Utah Constitution clearly secures to Utah citizens and prohibits unconstitutional government interference with the right of individual Utah citizens to keep and bear arms. And here's the really interesting thing. They're using this quasi-contract theory, which is, listen, we go back to when Utah became a state. And what our understanding of our Second Amendment rights were at that time, which is basically shall not infringe, okay? Because that's how simple it really was at the time that Utah became state. And absent that, we are not enforcing anything beyond that. So any infringement onto a person's right to keep and bear arms, or as I like to put it, the right of self-preservation, the state of Utah will no longer support or participate in any enforcement efforts. This is how the actual statute now reads. Section 53-5A-203, Prohibition on Enforcement. 1. A law enforcement officer, state employee, or employee of a political subdivision is prohibited from implementing, enforcing, assisting, or cooperating in the enforcement of a federal regulation on firearms, firearm accessories, or ammunition. 2. An employee of the state or political subdivision may not expend public funds or allocate public resources for the enforcement of a federal regulation on firearms, firearm accessories, or ammunition. And then there are a few exceptions, but it really deals with people who are actually contracted with or working for federal law enforcement agencies. Now, the other important part is this bill had an emergency enactment clause, which means the minute Governor Cox signed it, it became good law on March 20th. So this is good law. This is law as it exists in Utah, and congratulations to the citizens of Utah. I will tell you that of all of these Second Amendment sanctuary or Second Amendment affirmation laws that we've seen drafted, this one I think is the best drafted because it uses a quasi-contractual theory, and it basically forces the state Supreme Court to go back to a time of analysis that will begin only at the time of statehood in Utah and go no further than that. Additionally, not only does it preclude law enforcement from participating in enforcement efforts, it also precludes the state from allocating and using any taxpayer resource to assist in that. So this law is very carefully crafted and it's very thorough. So once again, Utah, that is House Bill 219, signed by Governor Cox on March 20th. Congratulations. You will be able to preserve your Second Amendment rights because you have a state and a state government that actually cares and understands what inalienable rights are. Listen, you may have more questions about this or anything else related to what's left of our Second Amendment rights. You guys should know how to contact Washington Gun Law by now, but if you don't, all of that is in the description box down below. In the meantime, I do want all of you to remember that part of being a lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here at Washington Gun Law, is to know what the law is in every situation and how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching and stay safe.